Ethan Callahan had never known softness in his 24 years of wandering. He was born to hardship and raised by the wilderness itself, moving from one dusty trail to another with nothing but his horse and his father's old rifle. Companionship was something he read in dime novels, but never tasted himself. The Arizona frontier was wide and empty, its silence louder than any crowd. Day after day, the sun baked the land until even dreams dried up. Ethan thought that was how life would remain for him, empty, solitary, and hardened like the desert rocks beneath his boots. The day he met her began like any other, scorching. Heat, endless sand, and the hollow clop of his horse's tired hooves. He walked beside the animal, giving it rest from his weight. His lips were cracked, his throat parched, and yet he pressed on, eyes fixed on the horizon where heat waves danced like mirages. Then, almost impossibly, a figure appeared in the shimmering distance. A slender shape moved with quiet grace, neither illusion nor threat. Ethan slowed, squinting through the glare, unsure if the desert itself had conjured the vision. As he drew nearer, the figure became real. A young Apache girl standing proud beneath the sun. Her long dark hair flowed with the wind, her gaze steady, unafraid. She carried herself with the strength of her people, yet there was softness in the way her eyes studied him. Ethan stopped a few paces away, unsure of his words. He had dealt with traders, soldiers, and ranchers, but never someone like her. She belonged to this land in a way he never could, and that truth humbled him. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the restless snort of his horse. Ethan cleared his throat, intending to ask who she was, but her voice came first. Low, melodic, and certain, she said, "You walk alone." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, one that reached deeper than mere observation. Ethan felt exposed, stripped of the walls he had built. All he could manage was a nod, his eyes dropping to the ground, as if the dust could shield him from her knowing stare. Aiyana, that was the name she later gave, did not look away. She studied the drifter's sunburnt face, his ragged clothes, the loneliness that clung to him like a shadow. Something in her expression softened, as though she recognized not a threat, but a man, untethered, drifting without anchor. Ethan felt heat rise to his cheeks, though the desert was already burning. Him raw. He had faced outlaws with guns drawn, but her calm gaze unsettled him in a way he could not understand. He shifted uncomfortably, trying to gather himself, but the girl smiled gently, the corners of her lips lifting with quiet mischief. Then, with the simplicity of a whisper, she asked, "May I ride with you?" The words struck Ethan like a bullet, though they carried no harm. His chest tightened, his pulse quickened. No woman had ever asked to share his path, not even for a moment. He felt the weight of her request, heavier than any burden he had carried across the frontier. Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came. His voice seemed trapped behind years of silence, behind the loneliness that had shaped him. The thought of her sitting behind him, close enough that he could feel her presence, frightened him more than any ambush. And yet, beneath the fear, something stirred. It was not weakness nor danger. It was life, blooming where he thought the desert had long ago buried it. He looked at her again, and for the first time, saw more than the harshness of the land. The girl's expression held no mockery, no impatience, only curiosity and a quiet strength that steadied him. Ethan finally managed a faint nod, though his throat still ached for words. He stepped aside, motioning toward his horse. She moved with confidence, placing her hand on the worn leather of the saddle before climbing gracefully onto the animal's back. The sight stole his breath, her small frame against the vast desert, sitting atop the beast he trusted more than anyone alive. Ethan mounted in front, the saddle groaning under the shared weight. He felt her presence behind him before she even touched the leather reins. Her nearness was electric, unsettling. He could almost feel her breath on his neck, warm against the scorch of the sun. His heart pounded louder than the horse's hooves. For a man who had never known a woman's touch, even the faint brush of her arm against his shoulder sent sparks through him. He gripped the reins tighter, as though control of the horse could steady the storm inside him. As they rode forward, the silence between them grew thick, but not empty. The desert stretched endlessly around them, yet for the first time, Ethan did not feel swallowed by it. Aiyana hummed softly, a tune that rose and fell like the wind through canyon walls. The sound melted into him, soothing yet awakening. He dared not turn his head, afraid that meeting her gaze again would unravel him completely. Still, he listened, letting her voice carry him farther than the trail beneath their horse. Ethan wondered what she saw in him, a broken drifter, scarred by solitude. He had no riches, no land, no name worth speaking of, yet she had asked to ride with him, as though his company alone mattered. That truth was more powerful than hunger, more sustaining than water. In that burning desert, beneath the relentless sun, Ethan felt something new take root inside him. Hope, fragile yet alive, whispered that perhaps his road was no longer his alone. The horizon stretched before them, endless and uncertain, but Ethan no longer feared it. With her behind him, the world did not seem so empty. Each hoofbeat carried more than a man and his horse. It carried the beginning of something he had never thought possible. The drifter who had once belonged only to dust and silence now carried the weight of companionship, and though it frightened him, it also saved him. The fire in his chest burned brighter than the desert sun. Ethan Callahan's life had been carved by silence, loneliness, and the relentless sun. Born in the shadow of frontier hardship, he drifted from one dusty trail to another, his horse his only true companion. At 24, his youth was already hardened, his heart untouched by tenderness. No woman's hand had ever lingered on his arm. No voice had whispered his name in affection. All he knew was the creak of saddle leather, the sting of dry winds, and the emptiness of nights under the stars. He believed that was his fate, written by the desert itself. That day began like all the rest. The sun merciless, the air heavy with dust, and the land stretched into eternity. His horse stumbled, hooves dragging from exhaustion, and Ethan chose to walk alongside to spare the creature. His canteen was nearly dry, his throat aching, yet he pressed forward, eyes narrowed against the glare. The Arizona desert was unforgiving, but he knew its cruelty well. He thought he was alone in it, just another ghost on the endless trail, until the shimmer of movement caught his eye. At first he thought it a mirage. The heat played tricks often, bending light into shapes that disappeared upon approach. But this figure did not vanish. It grew clearer with each step, a girl standing with calm strength, unafraid of the vast emptiness surrounding her. She was young, no older than him, her skin bronzed by sun, her hair long and black as midnight. Ethan slowed, his heart pounding. In a rhythm he did not recognize. She stood still as though waiting for him. When their eyes met, Ethan felt something shift. Hers was sharp, fierce, yet not unkind. They belonged to someone rooted deeply in this land, someone who carried both its beauty and its harshness. He faltered, unsure whether to speak or simply pass by. He had learned to keep to himself, less trouble that way, fewer wounds. But she broke the silence first, her voice soft, melodic yet steady. "You walk alone." It was not a question. It was a truth laid bare, one that made Ethan's chest tighten. He swallowed hard, his lips dry, and managed a small nod. The words he might have spoken died in his throat. He felt her gaze linger, reading more of him than he wished revealed. In that moment, he realized how fragile his solitude felt, how much it could shatter under the weight of a single human connection. The desert around him seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them standing in its burning heart. Her presence unsettled him more than any outlaw or storm. She stepped closer, her movements smooth, carrying quiet confidence. The air between them grew heavier, though her expression softened with curiosity. Ethan wanted to turn away, to protect himself from whatever she saw in him. Yet he couldn't. He had survived years without touch, years without trust, and now here she stood, Aiyana, as he would later learn, asking nothing of him except recognition. He felt heat rise to his cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. He was unprepared for her closeness. Then she smiled. It wasn't wide or playful, but gentle, carrying a warmth that pierced him deeper than words. She looked at his weary horse, then back at him, and with a calmness that left him breathless, she asked, "May I ride with you?" The sound of her voice sank into him, heavy as iron, soft as wind. Ethan's chest constricted. No one had ever asked to share his path, not even for a moment. Her request was simple, yet it shook the foundation of his lonely existence. His mind spun with fear and longing. He thought of how it would feel, her presence so close, her body behind his in the saddle. For a man untouched, even the thought of her hand brushing his shoulder was overwhelming. He struggled to breathe, his throat tightening. But beneath his panic was something new, something alive, a yearning, the kind of yearning he had buried beneath years of silence and dust. He stared at her, heart racing, uncertain if he could trust himself to answer. Finally, his head dipped in a small nod, almost involuntary. Aiyana's eyes softened further, a quiet acceptance in them. Without hesitation, she placed her hand on the saddle, her fingers brushing the worn leather that had carried Ethan across countless miles. Then, with graceful ease, she pulled herself up, settling behind him. The sight left him momentarily stunned. The world seemed to tilt, not from heat or exhaustion, but from the weight of something he had never known before: companionship. Ethan climbed onto the saddle before her, his movements stiff, his hands shaking against the reins. The horse shifted under their combined weight, but steadied quickly, as though recognizing the significance of the moment. Ethan could feel her presence instantly, the warmth of her body close behind, the faint brush of her arm as she adjusted her seat. His pulse thundered in his ears, every nerve in him screamed with awareness. The desert around them had not changed, but to Ethan everything felt different. The horse began to walk, hooves kicking up small clouds of dust. Ethan's grip on the reins tightened, as if control over the animal could steady his own unsteady heart. Behind him, Aiyana was silent, but her nearness spoke louder than words. He could feel her breathing, calm and steady, as if she belonged there all along. The thought terrified and comforted him at once. For the first time in his wandering life, he did not feel alone on the trail. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a vast emptiness filled with danger and silence. Yet Ethan felt neither fear nor emptiness anymore. Aiyana's presence had filled something hollow inside him, something he never thought could be touched. He wondered why she had chosen to ride with him, a ragged drifter with nothing to offer. Still, she had asked, and he had not refused. That small truth was enough to keep his heart burning with unfamiliar fire. For the first time, he hoped the trail would never end.